my name is Milton Jackson. Born in Chattanooga and raised up in Alton Park, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Beautiful place years ago.
All right. So, Mr. Jackson, tell me about your early childhood here in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh, my early childhood, there was a magnificent, being raised up by a beautiful family, Leonard and Charlie Jackson. And I was a little active around and playing in sandboxes in my front yard. My daddy built a sandbox for me, and I played around in that. Later on, I got to be 5 years old, and we had a little store there that I went down to and helped the lady work, Ma Francis, and helped her around to sweep the little store up and make a little change.
So that's what you were doing at an early age. You say about 5 years old.
5 or 6 years old. I used to just around the corner from me, and I would go down there and just help her, and she'd give me candy and a little money.
Okay. So as you grew older, you graduated from high school. You graduated from Howard High School?
No, I didn't graduate from Howard. I started to go into Howard, but I played practice football once with them. Then I quit. I thought I could do better making the money. I was a little behind in school, so I thought maybe I could make more money than I could by staying in school, because during those days that a lot of us black guys didn't think that going to school was going to benefit us any. So I dropped out of school and went to work. I worked over one summer. I worked over for Key James Brick Company, and I worked there for about 6 months. Then I left, and then I worked on the Brock Candy Company for about a year, and I left Brock and went back over to Key James Brick Company. Well, at 12 years old, I go back up a little bit. At 12 years old, Mr. Willie Key, he built a drive-in in Alton Park, Imperial Drive-In, the first black drive-in restaurant in Chattanooga. And I helped make the model for that place. I was at 12. And so then we went on, and I got into politics, passing out flyers in the community. And so from that went on up to years. I worked in politics, and my dad, I would go to watch them when they go vote. And we had to walk quite a ways to up in 45th Street from 35th to 45th to vote. So I would go up there with them and see how everything was going.
Okay, so Alton Park was at that time they had wards. So Alton Park was the 9th ward, is that correct?
Yeah.
9th ward was a heavy black ward, and from my understanding, unless you won the 9th ward, you didn't win the election.
Yeah, we go back, I look at that. It wasn't so heavily populated with black. It was a mixed neighborhood, black and white, because the black was covered from we say about 31st Street, which would be Crane Quarters, we call, and it would go out to 38th Street. And that's where, as far as where the black went, but from 38th Street back to 45th, 47th Street, it was all white. And that was north and south of 38th Street. It was like that. And so we went along with all of that, everything that went on. And so it was a nice neighborhood to live in.
Okay. And
my dad, he worked at the Tennessee Product and Chemical Company, which we call the Coke plant. Right. And I would scout through the neighborhood, and I love to go through a couple of guys, we all go through the woods out here, and sometimes we see snakes, we play with snakes and throw them around and everything, and then we walk through over near the creosote plant we call creosote, and they put creosote on cross tires and telephone poles back then.
Right. So there were several environmental issues that came to be known out there in that area. And in doing so, once those environmental issues, because we had the glass, you had the glass plant out there, and of course you said the other chemical plant out there, you had oil out there in the area and different things. And then it was a dumping area for some of that sand that came out of the foundries and things of that nature.
Oh yeah, we would, during the years, it used to flood a lot in the community. And sometimes it flooded twice a year or 3 times a year. It would flood all the way from Channel Place over to 4th Avenue. It would flood. But after flood water recedes, and we go all through that area, and from the creosote plant, we call creosote, and a lot of the creosote would wash over into the community over where they built a housing project. It would wash all over in there, and that's over near Central. It'd come all the way over to 38th Street, and 38th Street would flood. And I noticed when the water recedes, well, we see a lot of black gooey there. And as a young fella, I didn't pay any attention to that black gooey stuff all there. So they had that there. And then during the World War II, well, the wartime, I noticed about going up near 42nd Street and walking the creek bank, and I noticed a lot of goof stuff done turned hard there. And to find out later that it was coal tar that was dumped there. And I talking to various people back then about this coal tar, what is this stuff here? And it was in the creek and on the creek bank. And they said, this is stuff that came from Tennessee Product and Chemical Company, which we call the coke plant, right, where my father worked. So my sister and I used to take my father's lunch out when he leave and forget his lunch. And so we take it out there, and behind the ovens where he worked, he pasted doors up on the ovens. And when we be out there sometimes when they be dumping some coke, they took coal and made coke out of it. And they were dumping over into a car. They had a special car, like a box car, and had a train that pushed back that car back and forth. They had a wash there, like a car wash, automatic car wash, and it washed the coke down, and cooled it down, then they take it and dump it. And I found out later that during the wartime, well, the government got involved. And that's going, then I didn't pay any attention to it then, but I remembered all of those things from a child. Was a fireman in 1966. I was a fireman, and we went to all the plants that was out there, and I saw what different plants made, and so I stayed there with the fire department about a year and a half. Then I left and moved to Kansas City, and I went to work for Federal Reserve Bank, and then I left Federal Reserve Bank and went to a place called Bendix Corporation. Mm-hmm. And I worked at Bendix, and I saw various chemicals and things there, and I learned about it, and I made to be a foreman back then. They called foremen. Then later years they changed it to supervisors. Mm-hmm. So I was there a year, and I made a foreman. And then I stayed there 24 years, and I learned a lot there too, and about various chemicals and things and metals, and so I worked 24, and then I retired at 57, and then I decided to move back here to Chattanooga.
So when you moved back to Chattanooga, that's how you got involved in the environmental piece?
Yes, my wife, she was going to a meeting. One is in December. They was having the last meeting in December. It was called Stop Toxic Pollution Organization. And so she asked me to go with her, so I went, and I'm listening to everyone get up and speak about the smell that was in Alton Park. So I let everybody get up and talk, then I knew better than what they were talking about. So when everybody got to discussing everything, so I asked them, may I say a few words? And they said, yes, get up. And I introduced myself and started talking about what they were smelling. They said the creek smelled, and the creek was smelling. I said, no, it's not the creek. Chattanooga Creek is not smelling. I said, what you smell is coming from vesicle. It's coming from Bungie Oil Company, and which wasn't Bungie then, it was Swift back then. And I said, all that smell is coming from those companies there. And said, you got benzene, benzoyl, benzoic, and chlorine, and various chemicals there at the vesicle. And I said, this is what you smell. I said, Bungie Oil, Swift makes all of this, use chlorine in their product too, and that water they see coming on the sidewalk over here, I said, that smells too. And I said, you have cotton chemical, and well, you smell stuff from there, which was chlorine. I said, that's in the air too. I said, then I found out about this company on 38th Street, 38th and Central, and that they was using this other chemicals there, embalming, used with embalming fluid. So I said, this is what you smell. I said, and you got the dump over there, 36th Street landfill. I said, all of those places like that, it has some kind of contamination there. Okay. And so after discussing that with the group, and they asked me, said, if Milton said we need a president, it's voting time. So they voted me in as president of Stop Toxic Pollution Organization. And so by that time, it was Christmas came in, and February or March, EPA came up, and ATSDR, two representatives from there came up here, and they looking at the creek, and so I got word that they were coming, and I went and talked to them about it, and well, we went down to the health center, and I asked them, could we use the conference room? They said yes. So we started talking about the creek issue and the coal tar that was dumped into the creek. And so we talked about Tennessee Product down there, which was a building that had the oven still down there. So we discussed all of those issues. And they said, well, we don't see any need for us here in Chattanooga. So they
EPA didn't see a need to be here, although all those chemicals are flowing, huh?
Yes, all the chemicals were flowing. So they left, and I called Carl Blair. He was with ATSDR, and I asked him if he would come back. And we didn't finish our conversation. And I said, call Felice and ask Felice Burnett to come back with you. She was EPA administrator during the time. And so they came back, and we went back to the health center to discuss the issues. So I told them that during World War II, I said, I know you all want to pull out because there's nothing you all can do. I said, but there is something you can do, something you don't know about. That Chattanooga Creek has this coal tar in it. I said, the government is responsible for that creek being polluted with this coal tar. I said, during World War II, the government took over, the Department of Defense took over all companies that had anything to do with steel and with coke, making coke. Coke get hot enough to melt the steel. Rather than using gas, these companies use coke in their furnaces. And some people call them cupolas, but they're furnaces to melt steel. So they use that coke, and they had all this ash that's running from Tennessee Product and Chemical Company, which is the coke oven. And they had all this sludge coming, so they didn't have any place to dump it. So the contractor went to the government and said, we don't have any place to dump this. So from what I heard, that they said, well, dump it in the place you want to dump it, in the place you can. So they chose the creek bank and in the creek. So they dumped it several places in the creek and on the creek bank. They dumped enough in there to cause problems. And so we go down there and look at it. And Carl said, Milt said, since the government was involved in this, you just created us a job. You created us a job. And Felice said, yes, you did. So we went from there on to discuss the issues.
Okay. So how did you end up testifying before Congress? Because I understand you testified before Congress about it.
Well, before Congress, I went to Atlanta at ATSDR headquarters, Agent for Toxic Substance and Disease Register.
Okay.
And I went down and to discuss it with them, and with EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. I discussed it with them as well. And Felice Burnett, she was there with us too. So we all discussed that and discussed the issues with Chattanooga Creek. And because it had become a problem, and with the smell in Alton Park, and it created issues, and people were getting sick, and they were getting sick before. Right. And so I got more knowledge from the meeting with the people and getting information from them, so I could take it to EPA and ATSDR. Right. And then we discussed all of those issues. And I started thinking about the way we can start an organization throughout the United States. So we started a community advisory group through ATSDR, and I had a letter typed up to Dr. David Satcher, which was over CDC and ATSDR. And so, which later years became the 16th Surgical General, Black Surgical General of the United States. So he accepted the letter, and we told Dr. Johnson, he was administrator over ATSDR, and he accepted it too. And so we began to use that organization. I set up a board of 12 people on the board. And we would go various places throughout the United States to discuss things, and we discussed it from people throughout the United States, what problem they have in their community and places. Okay. And so then after we got the creek issue settled, and they started on the creek and started cleaning the creek, and I asked Nestor, he was administrator over the creek then, and over EPA, that branch, Regional 4. He was under Regional 4, and he was administrator over Regional 4 for the creek site. So I asked him, I needed to know if they could take and grudge the creek out some more and do some more cleaning on the creek. So he said, well, Milton, I can't do it. We don't have the money. So we had $8 million to use to clean the creek up. So he said we need $4 million more to get so we can go ahead and clean the rest up. And I called our Congressman Zach Wont, and he invited me to come to Washington. So I went to Washington and discussed this before the filtration committee, which he was on the committee, and he worked with that, and I got up and spoke before them and asked them if we could get the $4 million to complete the creek and do some grading on the creek, because I wanted to grudge the creek out some more because of flooding. And the more you grudge out the creek, the better it be, and less flooding we would have in the community, and in that community, and also in the East Lake area. So they didn't grant the $4 million, but Zach told me, Congressman Watt told me that I will keep going on this. He said, you brought a good point to Congress. So later on, they did accept it, my plea. I got some pushback, but it wasn't from them. It was from our mayor back during that time, Gene Roberts. He told me that, bless his soul, he's gone now. And he told me that, Milton, you're trying to get rid of all the companies in Chattanooga here. I told him, no, I'm trying to better Chattanooga where people can live and breathe freely. I said, I'm only doing what I know to do, that it can reduce the amount of the pollution that's in the air. On the north side of 52nd, looked like a lot of people passed away because they live right there at the fence of Vesicle. And with benzene, it get loose out there, and you better run and get someplace where you get in the house, because it was strong, it was real potent there. Yes. So I discussed this with, later years, I discussed it with John Anderson. He was the president of Vesicle, and he and Mike Poe was environmentalist out there at Vesicle. So we met. I got two of the members from Deborah Matthews' organization and to meet with me, and we went to Vesicle and we met with John Anderson and Mike Poe. And what I had in mind was to have some troubleshooters to work, and they were to 6 people, 2 on each shift, and to walk through the plant to check out all pipes that they had running through the plant that were leaking some type of fume out. And I happened to think about when we got a call down there one day when I was with the fire department, and I stepped up on the platform, and all at once a pipe burst and had a pot of ammonia in it. And the ammonia got all over my jacket. So I remembered all of that, and so I said, Mike and John, I said, we need troubleshooters. You need someone to walk these pipes all the time on all shifts. You work 3 shifts, so you need this done. And I said, will you hire 3 people, or get 3 people out of your crew here and let them check these pipes here? And that will reduce the smell, the pipe from breaking loose from this company here, and we won't smell all of that. And that went on, and so I met with them again, and he told me that, yes, Milton, we're going to do this. So by reducing and checking the pipes in the plant, well, it reduced a lot of the smell that we got. And Zach Wont was down there once when we was tearing down the old coke plant. And some got loose, and they said they was washing barrels out. But they had a leak, a big leak. And they told us one thing, but they didn't know that Zach was over there and Nestor Young with EPA, and all that big smell. Everybody had to run into the little house they had built. They had down there, and so to get out of the smell till it dissipated.
Yeah. So you know, there were certainly times of day that smell would be just unbearable. Couldn't stand it sometimes. But some of that stuff seeped into the ground, and some of those chemicals got into the ground. From my understanding, you were one of the ones that were responsible for getting all that stuff cleaned up out of the ground as much as possible.
Yeah, I talked to EPA and told them about these companies, Wheeling Manufacturing, we had Action Foundry, Mueller, Ross Meehan, Combustion. All those companies that had those furnaces and cupolas, they melt steel and melted different metal down there, and all of that will go through the smokestack. And they never paid too much attention to it. Then we had a lot of sand that people use for filler dirt. And
Black sand.
That's sand, and the sand had lead in it. And so they use that for filler dirt to fill in the various holes and low places. And to come to find out that a lot of places had lead in it. In Highland Park over there, over on Reed Avenue, we had a young white fella, little boy. He got caught up in that, and he was sick. And his mother told his father. They took him to the hospital, and he had he had too much lead in it going to his brain. So they checked it out. So EPA came up here and tested all the soil, and they tested the land over there, and they remove over in that area a lot of sand, a lot of lead out from the sand. And so I told them, some of them again, that these companies, they use those smokestacks and it blows. See, those small particles get in the air, it blow it through the air, because the small molecules, you might as well say, enough of those will settle in the ground and go in the ground, and if you start digging in there, you're going to dig it up. And a child play in the yard, you got all that in there. And then they didn't pay any attention, so they start building homes where all this sand was, and so they found out that, hey, now they digging up got a lot of areas.
Right.
Like over Calvin Johnson, where I went to school, and grade school, and it's laid all over that ground in the back in there, because I used to see trucks dumping that stuff out there to fill in.
And you talked about the health centers. Actually, the health center was sitting on top of the ground where they had filled in. And
well, the health center had
on Park School also.
Well, the health center had lead over there. They had some benzene because coming from the creek.
Right.
Because we had various ditches running to the creek, and we had cleaners down in Georgia which dumped into the creek, and that ran up there. Cleaning fluid ran up there, and beneath the health center, beneath Frank Trotter School, we had, not Frank Trotter, Austin Park, a little school there, John P. Franklin School, and at trash, we had all of this chemicals under it. And they called us down there one day, and Deborah Matthews, and she called me. She was with school board, so we got together, and I told them what was there because of the flooding.
Right.
And the raw sewage that was down there, because we had, years ago, we had the main that goes, the sewer line that runs across the creek, it broke, and they had to come out and fix that because all that raw sewage got into the creek.
Right.
See, and so the creek has its issues. And then the landfill, 36th Street landfill, it's supposed to have been a construction dump, but people dumped everything in there. And then you have asbestos and all of that in there. See, then we got Port of Water got phenol down there, and that phenol is part of, I mentioned a while ago, that embalming fluid, like embalming fluid. And that's a smell, it's a sweet smell, or sweet tasting smell that you run into. Now all of those chemicals get together, and we breathing that in. Yes, it's gonna make you sick. And you talk about one thing that I really dwelled on was our kids. You say that we are slow learners, but we are fed chemicals. We were fed chemicals in the community.
Every day.
See, you get up, you eat that. So this is the reason why I stood out there and I didn't stop. You couldn't buy me because I wasn't for sale. I had a mission to do, and so I was doing my mission.
And in doing that mission, that got you several awards, and I know you weren't looking at it for awards and things of that nature. I know your main thing was trying to clean up the community, trying to help the community, and then trying to help Chattanooga be better. Because at one time, Chattanooga was the pollution center of the world.
Yes, see, also, I've done that. Where I work at, I did some work up there. I cleaned up air handling units, and to make them blow air, clean, fresh air into the building, because you got to clean the filters. You got to get all that gunk off of the unit itself. You should maintain that unit, and I was using that for an example here. You clean up everything. The air conditioning that you use, you change your filters. And you got to maintain, do maintenance work on your unit. Okay. You got to use some water on that unit sometime. And spray that unit and make it clean. It might feel good, but you got to clean it. And so I traveled to different places discussing this. I traveled over to Denver, Colorado, a meeting there, and I've had people call from various parts of the United States and other foreign countries. They have problems as well.
Well, you became somewhat of an expert on that stuff. First time I heard your name, they called you Mr. Environmentalist. You were the person that was helping to clean up not just Orland Park, but the city as a whole, because you brought the spotlight out on a lot of things that were happening in Chattanooga and a lot of issues that no one was paying attention to, so to speak. When we started to clean up Chattanooga, when we started to get rid of the pollution, it was all because of some of the things that you started to do out in Orland Park. So we have to applaud you for your initiative and the things that you did to bring about change. We look at you as a change agent, because had it not been for you, we still may be doing some of the same thing here in Chattanooga that they were doing back in the 40s and 30s and 20s with those chemicals and things of that nature. So you brought a change about. You looked at it and said that there was a need to help your people, and we certainly appreciate you for that. As we start to close, I know there are some awards that you received, and we will have those awards shown on this particular video. But as we start to close, what would you say to our young people today about being an activist when it comes to ensuring that your community is still safe and sound as far as chemicals and things of that nature? Because we still have plants. You know, they're not polluting like they used to, but we still have plants.
Well, one thing that I would like to say and tell them that look and listen and go back into history, because history will tell you some things. Choose from the history, because history has a big picture for drawn already and shows in that where you live, the air you breathe, the land you trod upon each day. Make sure that it's clean. The government has jobs, and other plants and companies has jobs for you. Now, EPA has a lot of people working. ATSDR has a lot of people working. See, we need people, we need the young people to get involved in where they live, because if we don't start, all these chemicals will continue on. They make more and more and more, and they kill you off at a raw stage. Yes, they're good products, but at a raw stage, when it escapes through pipes and broken pipes and things of that nature, we pollute the air, we pollute the water, we kill off fish. And right now, I tell anyone that don't eat too many fish out of Chattanooga Creek, because it's not ready yet. Mother Nature has to take its part on that. And there's jobs that the young people can do. I was discussing with a man in Washington once. I went there, and he asked me what I did, and I told him. He said, well, my nephew, he's working with EPA. He got a job. He was doing well in school, and he was in chemistry and everything. He loved what he did and loved water. He thought, he went through high school, they saw him, they talked to him, went to college, made good grades. They hired him. They hired him because he was interested in what he was doing. So they hired him. The first job he went to, this is what his uncle told me, he went to California when they had fire on the mountains. He tested the water that runs from the mountain. He tested the water, see what chemical was in that water. And another thing, that the rocks and things you see, the flowers you see, all of those things, if you study those things, they are chemicals as well. See, study them. Just like a dog sit out and eat grass, that's medicine for that dog, and the Lord has planted that for that dog to eat. Study that. Study that. We need to get into this. Teachers, they need to teach this. They can create more jobs for our kids. They can create them. And I would love to have children to question me, question their parents. They have a lot of knowledge. And don't let them take all of that knowledge to the ground with them where no one can receive it.
Well, we certainly appreciate your efforts here in Chattanooga. You've done what we call a yeoman's job, so to speak, because it wasn't easy. As you say, you did have some kickbacks, and I'm sure you didn't just have kickback from the mayor. There was even some people in your community that didn't want you doing some of the things you were doing. But it was for the betterment of that community as well as the city as a whole. So we thank you here from the Bessie Smith Cultural Center at Chattanooga African American Museum for sharing your story with us and allowing us to be able to share this story with others. Thank you again for coming out today and sharing your knowledge, and we certainly hope that through your efforts, Chattanooga will continue to be a clean city. Thank you again.